2016, Netflix released the documentary The Minimalists. So how can the concepts and principles of minimalism be transferred into your business? Let's get into it. What's happening, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of Theory of Why. My name is Rob Johnson. So on today's episode, I want to talk about minimalism. It is a concept I have studied a ton over the last 5 years, and I think from a business owner's perspective, it's something that you really deeply need to consider when you are operating your company. So where this all started was in 2016, two guys by the name of Ryan Nicodemus and Joshua Fields Milburn released a documentary. It got picked up by Netflix, and it's called The Minimalists. Essentially, the purpose of the film is detailing their book tour. So they wrote a book that talked about their life that had basically a surplus of everything that you would need: cars, clothes. They were both super high-paid salespeople at corporate jobs, and then very quickly, both of their marriages fell apart. Josh's mom had passed away, and it really caused them both to do some really deep reflection on what are the things in life that matter and what are things that don't. And it's a really good contrast between how clear life can be with less and how cluttered life can be with more. I think minimalism has this reputation, at least when people first hear about it, they think, okay, you need to own the least amount of things as possible. And that's not what minimalism is. Minimalism isn't you need to own 6 things, a backpack, and 1 pair of underwear. That's not what they're going after. The concept of minimalism, or the philosophy of it, is everything that you own in life needs to have a purpose. Can you ascribe value or purpose to all the things that you own? One thing that was interesting in the documentary was the average household. Let me show I'm going to quiz Johnny. So Johnny, how many things do you think the average household has in it? How many items?
This is including everything, your vacuum, all that kind
All the things.
Oh geez, 1,500.
Yeah, 300,000. The average household has 300,000 objects. When you think about paper clips and pens and Ziploc baggies and all your storage bins, all your clothes, your tools, like it starts to add up. And in the documentary, they talked about playing this game where for 30 days, whatever day of the month it is, that's how many things you get rid of. So on day 1, you get rid of 1 thing. On day 2, you get rid of 2. And then it keeps on building. And the idea is to just go through and declutter your house and really think about, man, do these things in my life have a purpose, or are they just sitting around collecting dust for no reason? And I did this myself, like in my home office. I went through and I was like, wow, I have a lot of things, data cables, laptop parts, like just things that I'm never going to use that are just sitting there, because one day I am going to need a 240 gigabyte, spin disk for a computer. I'm not. It just got me thinking about, okay, what are the things that actually matter? And I was able to go through and declutter probably 75% of the things that I had in my home office. It just got me thinking about all of the things that I have in my life. Do they have a purpose? Do I use them? If I don't use them, could somebody else use them to get value out of them? So that goes into the area of donating and giving things away. And then I took it another level and I was like, what about my business? What about the things that I have in my business? Are there things that I currently have that I don't need or will never need? And so I went through desks and our storage, and we had a clean out day and went through and just got rid of a lot of things that weren't necessary and gave away a lot of things, a lot of camera equipment that we weren't going to use, tripods, and just got rid of things. And then I took it another level and I was like, well, what about software? What software are we using as a company that we don't need to use? What tools are we paying for that aren't necessary to the mission? Because when you run a business, it's just kind of like in your personal life, those subscriptions can add up. You might be paying $10 for Spotify and $15 for Netflix and then $8 for Hulu, and then over time it just builds and builds and builds. A business is the same thing. So I went through and we had a 90-day expense report, everything that we had, and we sorted it into buckets. What are the things that we can get rid of? What are the things that we need to stay? And then of the things that need to stay, are there other software solutions out there that we can then consolidate and get multiple benefits out of one tool and reduce all of these other line items? So we did that as well. And that's something that I now do every year, because I want to make sure that as a business we're running as lean as possible, and that all of the tools, all of the devices and things that we have, that there is a purpose behind them. Because we don't want to be in the game of just collecting assets just to collect them, or having a ton of software licenses just to have them, because those things add up. For our agency, Adobe, just by itself, just for the licenses that we have for roughly 10 employees, is upwards of $1,000 a month. That's a very expensive tool. So if we have additional licenses on our account that we don't need, that can add up very quickly. So in your business, I always tell people when I go in to consult with them, there's probably at least 10% in software expenses that we can cut on day one, just from going through and looking at the licenses that you have ascribed to your company that you no longer need. So it's a reminder of taking these concepts of minimalism, which I use in my personal life, and transferring them over to my business life. And then also, hopefully, reminding business owners to do the same thing. You don't need to be a minimalist and have, 2 t-shirts and 1 pair of pants, and that's all you wear all day, every day. But you need to be able to say, okay, all of these things in my business that I point to, is there value or worth behind that? Can I justify owning this particular thing? Because sometimes we own things just for appearance. So you might have, whether it's a particular vehicle, or if you're a videographer, you might have a perfectly fine camera that works and you want an upgrade just for an upgrade. People do this with phones all of the time, and I've definitely been in that camp before, where you just do an upgrade just to do an upgrade. And you have to wonder, well, why are you doing an upgrade? What's the purpose behind it? Is it you're an enthusiast and you really like the features of the new phone, you want to try it out? Okay, that makes sense. Is it just so you can say that you have it? That doesn't make sense. So it's this idea of all the things that you own, can you justify the purpose for them? So the takeaway for this podcast is, as a business owner, the most productive couple of hours you can have, if you haven't done it lately, go to your QuickBooks or whatever your financial software is, or if you're using Excel, print out your bank statements, credit card statements, whatever, for the last 90 days. And the reason why I say 90 instead of 30 is because you may have subscriptions that aren't recurring every month, or you might have things that you only purchase, once in a while. So it's good to look back at least 3 months. If you can go farther, great. But highlight everything on that list that you're really not sure why it's there, or you don't really think it's totally necessary. And then if you have a team that you review things with, talk about cutting those expenses. But for us, I think I talked about this on a recent episode, we did this exercise right at the end of Q1, and annually, just from software consolidation and software, removing software from our company that we didn't need, we saved just under $30,000 a year. And that's a tremendous amount of money for an organization. So going and doing those exercises can be really, really helpful to the bottom line of your company. So one quote I wanted to look at today, it was the one that sprung to mind. I've heard it from Dave Ramsey 100 times, but I was wondering about the origin of the quote, and I'm just going to assume that the internet is correct. But the quote is from Will Rogers, and the date on this is 1879. So this dude was way ahead of his time, if this is the case. It says, "Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want to impress people they don't like." And that is our society today. One YouTuber, and I'll make sure to put his link in the description because I've been binge watching his videos. His name is CoffeeZilla. He's an absolutely tremendous researcher, and he goes through and exposes YouTube scams and these crypto scams and NFT scams and people that have tried to rip other people off. And he goes and does this investigative journalism, does a deep dive into it, and he exposes a lot of really famous people that are trying to scam people out of millions of dollars through NFTs or crypto or pyramid schemes or whatever. Absolutely fantastic channel to look at, and it's also a case study in how people try and use a particular image to sell another product to people that has no value. So really good case study for what we're talking about today. The last piece I want to talk about is is our proverb for today. And I had to go outside of Proverbs for this because this is one of my favorite verses in terms of when we look at possessions. And people say this a lot. They say it a lot of different ways, but this particular verse is out of 1 Timothy. It's chapter 6, verses 6 through 12. It says, "For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that." And essentially, it's kind of looking at the basics. It's funny, over the last week we lost our power, and it really gives you an inside look into like what are the important things that matter and the things that you take for granted. You actually value all of the small things that you have. So, when like I pray with my kids before bed, like we pray for all of the basic things that we have as well: running water, electricity, food in the fridge. Like those are the things that are really important that I think I know that I overlook sometimes as well. So those basic necessities are really, really important. And it's important to remember the value of them, because even during COVID, when you went to the store and there was no toilet paper, there was no, paper towel, or, there was, all the frozen food was sold out or whatever, you really start to understand, wow, these really basic things that I've always overlooked are quite important to the day-to-day. And it's just, I think we all have a habit of overlooking those things from time to time. I know I have. And whether it's in your personal life or your business, this concept of minimalism can really help you take a step back and evaluate the things in your life that matter. And hopefully this podcast today has helped you do just that. So that's going to be it for this week's episode. I appreciate all of you watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, do me a favor and subscribe. Apart from that, we'll catch you next week. Take care.